Serpentine Love. A paranormal Gorgon romance. By Wynne Valentine. Copyright 2024 by Wynne Valentine. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, stored or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, scanning, or otherwise without written permission from the publisher. It is illegal to copy this book, post it to a website, or distribute it by any other means without permission. This novel is entirely a work of fiction. The names, characters, and incidents portrayed in it are the work of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events or localities is entirely coincidental. Wynne Valentine asserts the moral right to be identified as the author of this work. Chapter 1: Discovery. The dim light of Marcus's lantern flickered, casting eerie shadows across the crumbling walls of the ancient chamber. The air was thick with heat and dust, each breath a labor for his lungs. The excavation site, nestled in the rugged hills of the Greek island of Naxos, was a testament to the area's rich history. The scent of the nearby Aegean Sea mingled with the musty odor of centuries-old stone, creating an atmosphere that was both invigorating and oppressive. Faded frescoes adorned the walls, their once vibrant colors now dulled by time and decay. Marcus traced his fingers along the intricate patterns, feeling the weight of history beneath his touch. The chamber, part of a larger complex dating back to the Mycenaean period, had been a chance discovery during a routine survey of the island's lesser-known archaeological sites. Marcus, however, was undeterred by the oppressive atmosphere. His focus was unwavering, his dedication to the excavation bordering on obsessive. He had always been drawn to the mysteries of the past, a passion that had led him from the hallowed halls of Cambridge to this remote island in the Cyclades. With meticulous care, he brushed away the dirt from the chamber floor, his hands guided by the soft, mystical glow of his ancestral amulet. The relic, an intricate silver pendant inscribed with symbols of a language long forgotten, hung around his neck, its light pulsating gently as if echoing his heartbeat. Marcus had always known the amulet was special, a family heirloom passed down through generations, but it wasn't until this excavation that he began to understand its true significance. As Marcus cleared more of the floor, he noticed the amulet's glow intensifying. It cast a beam of light that guided his gaze towards a section of the wall obscured by debris. Curiosity piqued, he moved closer, his heart pounding in his chest. The wall was not plain but ornately carved, depicting serpentine motifs that seemed to dance in the amulet's light. With bated breath, Marcus began to clear away the rubble. Each piece he removed revealed more of the intricate carvings, until finally, the shape of a door became apparent. His heart raced as he grasped the handle, a stone serpent that seemed to hiss under his touch. The door swung open with a groan, sending dust swirling through the stale air. Stepping through the threshold, Marcus held up his amulet, its warm glow illuminating the cavernous space before him. What he saw made him gasp, his heart pounding wildly in his chest. Coiled on a raised dais was a figure straight out of myth, a Gorgon. Her human torso and face were a stark contrast to the writhing serpents that took the place of her hair. Each serpent seemed to possess a life of its own, their scales glinting in the amulet's light. Marcus stood frozen, his breath caught in his throat. This was not just a discovery, it was an encounter with the legendary. He had heard tales of Gorgons, creatures so fearsome that their gaze could turn a man to stone. Yet, here he was, not stone, but flesh and blood, his eyes locked onto the mythical being. The Gorgon's eyes fluttered open, a ferocious hiss escaping her lips as her serpents rose defensively. Marcus froze, raising his hands in a calming gesture. The amulet around his neck swung freely, its light catching the Gorgon's gaze. Recognition flashed in her eyes, and her serpents lowered slightly, though wariness still etched her features. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice like the hiss of 1,000 snakes. She spoke in an ancient dialect of Greek, one Marcus had only ever encountered in texts. Yet, he understood her perfectly, his mind translating her words as if it were his native language. "I am Marcus," he replied, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "I mean you no harm." The Gorgon eyed him warily, her serpentine hair writhing with agitation. "Many have sought me out, none with good intentions," she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of isolation and mistrust. "What makes you different?" Marcus looked at her, not with the fear or revulsion she was accustomed to, but with kindness and a spark of scholarly curiosity. "I want to help you," he said sincerely, his mind already racing with questions about her existence and the implications for historical understanding. A look of surprise crossed the Gorgon's face, followed by one of sadness. "Help me?" she echoed, her voice tinged with bitterness. "My curse is permanent, human. None can help me." "Then perhaps it's time someone tried," Marcus replied, determination in his voice. He took a cautious step forward, his hand outstretched in a gesture of peace. The Gorgon regarded him for a long moment before finally nodding. "Very well," she said, her voice softening slightly. "I am Euryale. I will hear your offer of help, human. But know this, if you betray my trust, your fate will be worse than stone." Marcus nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "I promise, Euryale. I will return with a plan. Until then, your secret is safe with me." As he turned to leave, Marcus's mind was ablaze with the implications of this discovery. He knew that his life, and the understanding of history itself, was about to change forever. With one last look at Euryale, he stepped back through the hidden door, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The journey back to his research tent was a blur, his mind racing with questions and possibilities. The cool night air of Naxos filled his lungs as he emerged from the excavation site, the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore a stark reminder of the world beyond this incredible discovery. Chapter 2: Adjustment. Night descended over the excavation camp like a cloak, the moon a mere sliver in the sky. Marcus moved stealthily through the shadows, his heart pounding in his chest as he approached Euryale's lair. He paused at every corner, ears straining for any sign of unwanted company. The camp was quiet, save for the distant murmur of voices from the communal tent and the occasional hoot of an owl. At the entrance to Euryale's lair, Marcus took a deep breath before stepping inside. Euryale waited, her serpents writhing nervously. She nodded at him, her eyes reflecting the dim light of his lantern. Together, they began their covert journey through the camp. Stealth was paramount. They moved silently, holding their breath as they passed near other tents. Marcus's senses were heightened, every crunch of gravel underfoot sounding like a gunshot to his ears. He guided Euryale carefully, their path lit only by the soft glow of his amulet. They narrowly avoided detection by a group of archaeologists engrossed in a late-night discussion, their shadows blending into the darkness just in time. Relief washed over them as they slipped into Marcus's private research tent. The interior was cluttered but homely, filled with books, maps, and artifacts scattered across every surface. A makeshift bed lay in one corner, piled high with blankets. Marcus gestured for Euryale to sit, offering her water and simple provisions. Euryale looked around, her gaze taking in the modest furnishings. She seemed out of place, her ancient, mythical presence a stark contrast to the mundane surroundings. Marcus watched her, wondering what she thought of this new world she found herself in. With safety temporarily secured, Marcus and Euryale began their discussion in earnest. Euryale voiced her apprehension, her hands wringing nervously. "This world, it is so different," she whispered, her voice filled with uncertainty. Marcus leaned forward, his expression determined. "I know it seems overwhelming," he said, "but I promise, I will help you adapt. We'll take it one step at a time." Euryale looked at him, hope flickering in her eyes. And what then? She asked. What future can there be for one such as me? Marcus took her hand, squeezing it gently. A future where you're not alone, he promised. A future beyond your cursed existence. Euryale took a deep breath, her gaze distant as she began to speak. The lantern light flickered, casting dancing shadows across her face, which was already a tapestry of complex emotions. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper, yet it filled the tent with a weight that made Marcus hold his breath in anticipation. I was not always as you see me now, she started, her eyes reflecting a time long past. Once, I was a woman of extraordinary beauty, a priestess in the temple of Athena. My name was whispered with reverence and envy in equal measure. My hair was like spun gold, my eyes as blue as the Aegean Sea, and my laughter was said to bring smiles to the faces of the gods themselves. Marcus listened, his heart already beginning to ache with the knowledge of the tragedy that would follow. He could almost see her as she described herself, a radiant figure bathed in the golden light of a bygone era. But beauty, it seems, is often a double-edged sword, Euryale continued, her voice tinged with bitterness. It draws admiration, yes, but also jealousy. And jealousy, my dear Marcus, is a poison that can corrode even the purest of hearts. She paused, her eyes clouding with remembered pain. There was a man, Poseidon, the god of the sea. He was enamored with me, his desire bordering on obsession. But I spurned his advances, for my heart belonged to another, a mortal man, kind and true. Poseidon, unable to bear the rejection, turned his jealous rage against me. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he imagined the wrath of a god descending upon a mere mortal. He leaned in, his attention fully captured by her tale. One night, as I walked along the shore, Poseidon appeared before me. His eyes held a storm of fury and despair. He cursed me, transforming me into this creature you see before you. My golden hair became a writhing nest of serpents, my beautiful face a mask of terror. I remember the pain, Marcus. It was as if every bone in my body was being shattered and reforged. The agony was unbearable, and when I finally opened my eyes and saw my reflection in the still waters of the sea, I screamed. Her voice broke, and a single tear trickled down her cheek, glistening like a diamond in the lantern light. Marcus reached out, gently brushing it away with his thumb, his touch feather-light and filled with empathy. I ran, she whispered, her voice trembling. I ran from my home, from my lover, from everything I knew. I hid in caves and dark places, shunned by all who saw me. The horror in their eyes, it was worse than any physical pain. I was a monster, a creature of nightmares, and I was alone. Marcus's heart ached at the depth of her loneliness, the centuries of isolation she had endured. He could see the raw emotion in her eyes, the lingering anguish etched into her immortal features. Each word she spoke was a fragment of her shattered life, a testament to her unyielding spirit. But I survived, she said, her voice growing stronger. I learned to live with the curse, to embrace the darkness. I became a guardian of ancient secrets, a protector of forgotten knowledge. I waited, Marcus. I waited for someone who could see past the monstrous exterior, who could understand the woman beneath. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a desperate hope that tore at his heart. And now, here you are. A man who sees me not as a monster, but as a woman in need of help. A man who offers me a chance at redemption, a future beyond this cursed existence. Marcus met her gaze, his resolve to help her solidifying into an unbreakable promise. I see you, Euryale, he said, his voice filled with conviction. I see the strength, the resilience, the beauty that lies within. And I will help you. Together, we will find a way to lift this curse and give you the future you deserve. His words hung in the air, a vow that bound them together in a shared purpose. Euryale's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and she reached out, her hand trembling as she touched his cheek. In that moment, a connection was forged, a bond that transcended time and circumstance, uniting them in a journey that would redefine their destinies. As the night wore on, the initial wariness between them began to dissipate. Their conversation flowed easily, spanning topics ancient and modern. Marcus talked about his work, his passion for history, his dreams of uncovering the truth behind myths. Euryale listened, her eyes shining with interest. She, in turn, shared stories of her past, of the ancient world she knew. Marcus found himself growing more empathetic, his admiration for Euryale's strength and resilience increasing. Euryale, meanwhile, became more open to his ideas for her integration into the modern world. She laughed at his jokes, asked questions about his life, and shared her own thoughts and fears. The dynamic between them shifted, hinting at a potential for something deeper than just mentorship. The late hour found them wrapped in a comfortable silence, the soft glow of lantern light casting flickering shadows around the tent. Marcus reached out tentatively, his fingers gently grazing one of Euryale's serpentine tresses. The serpent coiled around his finger, its scales cool and smooth to the touch. Euryale shivered, her eyes widening in surprise. It was the first intimate contact she had experienced in centuries, her isolation a chasm of untouched emptiness. She looked at Marcus, her gaze held captive by his. The air between them crackled with charged energy, their breaths sinking in the silent moment. Unable to resist the magnetic pull, Marcus leaned in, his heart pounding wildly in his chest. His eyes flicked to Euryale's lips, full and enticing, a siren's call he could no longer ignore. He brushed his lips against hers, a feather-light touch that sent a jolt of electricity coursing through his veins. The sensation was explosive, a fiery passion that ignited within them both, consuming them in its intense heat. Euryale gasped against his mouth, her breath hitching in surprise. Her serpents writhed, coiling around Marcus's arms, their cool scales contrasting with the warmth of Euryale's skin. She leaned into the kiss, her body pressing against his with an urgency that matched his own. Their kiss deepened, tongues clashing in a dance as old as time, each stroke fanning the flames of their desire. Marcus's hands roamed her body, exploring every curve and valley. He felt the smooth. Euryale's gaze fell on the amulet around Marcus's neck, its soft glow a constant presence. "Your amulet," she began, hesitation in her voice. "It is not just a protective charm, is it?" Marcus looked down at the pendant, his fingers tracing the intricate symbols. "No, it's not," he admitted. "It's a key, passed down through generations in my family. A key to unlocking the truth behind myths." Euryale's eyes widened in understanding. "And it led you to me," she whispered. Marcus nodded. "It did. And now, perhaps together, we can unravel more secrets of the past." With the first light of dawn filtering through the tent, Marcus prepared to leave. He gathered his notes, his mind racing with the tasks ahead. As he turned to go, Euryale reached out, her hand resting on his arm. "Marcus," she said, her voice steady and sure. "Together, we will face whatever comes next. As partners." Marcus smiled, covering her hand with his own. "Partners," he agreed. As he stepped out into the dawn, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges ahead were vast, the risks immeasurable. But with Euryale by his side, he was ready to face them. For in the heart of the excavation camp, hidden away in a modest tent, a bond had been forged, a partnership born. And together, they would redefine the boundaries between myth and reality. Chapter 3, Close Call. The morning light filtered softly through the canvas of Marcus's research tent, casting a warm glow over the cluttered interior. The air was filled with the scent of old parchment and brewing coffee, a peaceful atmosphere that seemed to cocoon them from the world outside. Marcus and Euryale sat side by side, their shoulders touching, a comfortable silence stretching between them. The tent was a microcosm of their new reality, filled with a blend of ancient artifacts and modern research equipment. Suddenly, the peaceful atmosphere was shattered by the sound of approaching footsteps. Marcus tensed, his head snapping up as he listened. Euryale, sensing his alarm, looked at him, her eyes wide with concern. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by a hummed tune that sent a shiver of dread down Marcus's spine. "Marcus, are you in there?" called a voice, cheerful and unsuspecting. It was Zoe, Marcus's assistant, her footsteps crunching on the gravel path leading to the tent. Panic surged through Marcus as he realized the danger they were in. If Zoe found Euryale, everything would be ruined. He exchanged a frantic look with Euryale, seeing his own alarm reflected in her eyes. They had to act fast. The sound of Zoe's footsteps grew nearer, her voice calling out again, oblivious to the turmoil she was causing. Marcus's mind raced, his heart pounding in his chest as he desperately sought a way out. In a silent, rushed scramble, Marcus and Euryale gathered their belongings, their movements hurried yet careful, avoiding any noise that could alert Zoe. Marcus stuffed his notes and maps into his bag, his hands shaking with adrenaline. Euryale gathered her few possessions, her serpents writhing nervously, reflecting her agitation. Stealth was paramount. They moved with held breaths, their hearts pounding in their chests. Zoe's voice grew louder, her footsteps stopping just outside the tent. Marcus froze, his hand clenched tightly around his bag, his eyes locked onto Euryale's. The tension in the air was palpable, the suspense heart-pounding. Zoe pushed open the tent flap, her figure silhouetted against the bright morning light. Marcus and Euryale stood frozen, their escape route blocked. But luck was on their side. Zoe, humming to herself, turned to rummage through a pile of notes on the desk, her back to them. Seizing the opportunity, Marcus and Euryale slipped silently through the back of the tent, their hearts hammering in their chests. As they fled, they could hear Zoe's voice behind them, still oblivious to their presence. The close call underscored the fragility of their situation, the risks they faced. They couldn't afford to be complacent, to let their guard down. Their secret was precarious, their safety anything but guaranteed. With Zoe left behind, Marcus and Euryale fled deeper into the island's interior, their hearts still racing from the near miss. The terrain was rugged, the relentless sun beating down on them as they navigated the rocky path. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, their bodies pushed to the limit by the adrenaline coursing through their veins. As they rounded a bend, relief washed over them. Nestled into the cliff face was a hidden sea cave, its entrance obscured by foliage. The cool, secluded interior beckoned, promising a welcome respite from the outside world's prying eyes. They ducked inside, the sudden drop in temperature sending a shiver down their spines. The cave was damp, the air filled with the scent of salt and the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. But it was safe, a sanctuary where they could regroup and catch their breath. They slumped down onto the cool sand, their bodies aching with exertion, their hearts still pounding with the remnants of fear and adrenaline. With the cave providing temporary safety, Marcus and Euryale could finally catch their breath. Marcus set to work, his movements calm and methodical as he sought to make the cave more habitable. He unpacked their meager belongings, setting up basic amenities with the efficiency born of years of fieldwork. Euryale watched him, her eyes filled with gratitude and a growing trust. The close call with Zoe had shown them the fragility of their situation, but it had also strengthened the bond between them. They were in this together, their fates intertwined, their trust in each other absolute. As night fell, Marcus and Euryale huddled around a small fire in the cave, its flickering flames casting a warm, inviting glow that danced across their features. The coolness of the cave was banished, replaced by a cozy warmth that seemed to wrap around them like a lover's embrace. The air was filled with the scent of salt and the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore, a symphony that only served to heighten the intimacy of their secluded sanctuary. A comfortable silence stretched between them, the ease with which they now inhabited each other's space a testament to their growing intimacy. Marcus's gaze lingered on Euryale, his eyes tracing the lines of her face, the curves of her body, the sinuous movements of her serpentine tresses. He reached out tentatively, his hand gently grazing one of the serpents. It coiled around his finger, its scales cool and smooth, the sensation sending a jolt of pleasure straight to his core. Euryale leaned into his touch, her eyes smoldering with rekindled desire. The close call with Zoe had ignited something within them, a spark that had lain dormant since their first intimate moment. Now, in the safety of the cave, that spark was fanning into a flame, a fire that threatened to consume them both. She let out a soft sigh, her breath hitching as Marcus's fingers tangled in her serpents, their writhing caress sending shivers of anticipation down her spine. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice husky with desire. "Your touch, it's like nothing I've ever felt before." Marcus smiled, his eyes locked onto hers. "And this is just the beginning, Euryale. I want to explore every part of you, to know every secret, every desire." Euryale's eyes widened, her breath hitching in her throat. "Then let me show you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She took his hand, guiding it through her serpents, showing him how to stroke them, how to elicit a ripple of pleasure that coursed through her entire body. Marcus watched, fascinated, as her eyes fluttered closed, her lips parting in a soft gasp. He could feel her serpents responding to his touch, their cool scales warming beneath his fingers, their writhing movements growing more urgent, more demanding. "They are an extension of me, Marcus," Euryale murmured, her voice a husky whisper. "Every touch, every caress, I feel it all." Marcus's breath hitched, his body aching with desire as he understood the implication. He explored her serpents with renewed fascination, his fingers tracing their lengths, his palms cupping their coils. Euryale's eyes fluttered closed, her breath coming in soft gasps as she reveled in the sensation. "Does this feel good?" Marcus asked, his voice a low rumble. He stroked one of the serpents, his fingers tracing a path from its base to its tip, eliciting a shudder from Euryale. "Yes," she gasped, her body arching into his touch. "More, Marcus. I need more." Emboldened, Marcus leaned in, capturing her lips in a fierce kiss. Euryale responded in kind, her arms wrapping around him, pulling him close. Their kiss deepened, tongues clashing in a dance that was both primal and intimate. Marcus could feel Euryale's serpents wrapping around him, their cool scales contrasting with the heat of her body, the sensation exhilarating and erotic. In the aftermath, they clung to each other, their bodies still entwined, their hearts still racing. The cave was filled with the soft sounds of their ragged breaths, the rustling of leaves, and the distant hum of the sea. Marcus looked at Euryale, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames, her face flushed with pleasure. He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her lips, his hand gently stroking her cheek. "I love you, Euryale," he murmured, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and tenderness. "I love you more than anything in this world." She smiled, her eyes filled with a soft glow. "And I love you, Marcus. With every fiber of my being. With every beat of my heart." As they lay there, their bodies entwined, their hearts beating as one, they knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Their love was a fortress, a sanctuary, a beacon of light that would guide them through the darkest of times. "We need help," Marcus said, breaking the comfortable silence. His voice was steady, but Euryale could hear the underlying tension. "Someone who understands the island, who can guide us." Euryale nodded, her serpents coiling restlessly around her shoulders. "But who can we trust?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. "We've seen how quickly things can go wrong." Marcus's mind raced, considering their options. Then, a name came to him, a memory from his early days on the island. "Nikos," he said, as they entered Nikos's home, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. The interior was cozy, filled with mementos of a life spent at sea. Fishing nets hung from the ceiling, and the walls were adorned with faded photographs and ancient-looking maps. The air was thick with the scent of herbs and the sea, a comforting aroma that seemed to wrap around them. Nikos gestured for them to sit at a worn wooden table, its surface scarred by years of use. He busied himself preparing tea, the familiar ritual seeming to calm the tension in the room. When he finally sat down, his eyes were serious, but kind. "Now," he said, his voice low and conspiratorial, Tell me everything." And so, Marcus and Euryale shared their story, their words tumbling out in a rush. They spoke of their meeting, of the dangers they faced, of their growing feelings for each other. Nikos listened intently, his weathered hands wrapped around his mug of tea, nodding occasionally. When they finished, Nikos leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You've stumbled into something bigger than you realize," he said, his voice grave. "But you're not alone. This island has protected its secrets for centuries, and it will protect you too, if you let it." He stood, moving to a battered chest in the corner of the room. From it, he retrieved an old book, its pages yellowed with age. "This," he said, placing it gently on the table, "contains the true history of this island. The stories that don't make it into the guidebooks or the academic texts. It speaks of creatures like you, Euryale, and of the magic that still lingers in the hidden places of this land." Marcus and Euryale exchanged a look of wonder. Here, in this unexpected place, they had found not just an ally, but a gateway to a world they had only begun to understand. As the night wore on, Nikos shared tales of the island's secret history, of hidden sanctuaries and ancient pacts. By the time the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, Marcus and Euryale felt a renewed sense of hope. They had found a protector, a guide, and a friend in Nikos. As they prepared to leave, returning to their hidden cave with promises to return soon, they knew that their journey was far from over. But with Nikos's help, and the secrets of the island on their side, they felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The cool morning air caressed their faces as they stepped outside, the first rays of sun painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. Marcus took Euryale's hand, squeezing it gently. She smiled up at him, her serpents coiling contentedly around her shoulders. Together, they set off towards their hidden sanctuary, their hearts lighter than they had been in days, ready to face the new chapter that was unfolding before them. Chapter 4: Exploration. Beneath the cloak of night, Marcus and Euryale prepared for their adventure. The sea cave, their hidden sanctuary, was filled with the soft rustling of fabric as Marcus carefully wrapped a cloak around Euryale's shoulders, the hood pulled up to hide her distinctive features. He handed her a veil, a delicate piece of fabric that shimmered in the dim light of their makeshift lantern. She draped it over her face, her eyes gleaming through the thin material. Marcus packed a small bag with essentials, a water skin, a flint for fire, and a small bundle of food. He slung it over his shoulder, then turned to Euryale, his eyes filled with excitement and apprehension. "Ready?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and fear. They stepped out of the cave, the night air cool and crisp. Marcus held a lantern, its soft light casting a warm glow that illuminated their path. The rugged terrain was bathed in silver moonlight, the shadows dancing as they made their way through the underbrush. The island of Naxos revealed itself to them in a new light. The scent of wild thyme and oregano filled the air, crushed beneath their feet as they walked. Ancient olive trees, their gnarled trunks twisted by centuries of wind and sun, stood as silent sentinels in the night. In the distance, the soft murmur of the Aegean Sea provided a soothing backdrop to their exploration. The sound of the sea grew louder, a symphony of waves crashing against the shore. They emerged onto a secluded beach, the sand glistening like diamonds under the moonlight. Marcus took Euryale's hand, guiding her to the water's edge. She hesitated at first, her feet sinking into the cool sand, the sensation foreign yet inviting. As the first wave touched her toes, she gasped, the coolness of the sea sending a shiver up her spine. Marcus watched her, his eyes reflecting the starlit sky, a smile playing on his lips. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he murmured, his voice barely audible over the sound of the waves. Euryale nodded, her eyes wide with wonder. She had seen the sea countless times, but never like this, under the veil of night, with the man she was falling in love with by her side. She squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with a mix of emotions she couldn't quite name. Marcus led her away from the shore, deeper into the island's interior. They arrived at a clearing, the remnants of ancient ruins scattered around them like the bones of a long-dead beast. The moonlight cast an ethereal glow on the crumbling columns and statues, bringing a sense of timelessness to the scene. Marcus's eyes lit up as he began to explain the history of the ruins, his passion for archaeology shining through his words. "These ruins date back to the Mycenaean period," he said, his voice filled with reverence. "Can you imagine the lives that were lived here, the stories these stones could tell if they could speak?" Euryale listened, fascinated by the reverence in his voice, the way his eyes danced as he spoke of the past. She had lived through those times, had seen the rise and fall of civilizations, but hearing them from Marcus's perspective made them seem new, exciting. As they stood among the ruins, Marcus pointed out the constellations in the clear night sky. Euryale looked up, her eyes reflecting the stars like tiny diamonds. Marcus gently lifted her veil, allowing her to see the beauty of the night without obstruction. Her breath hitched, the cool night air brushing against her skin, the sight of the stars above filling her with awe. They sat on a fallen column, their shoulders touching, their breaths mingling in the night air. Their conversation flowed easily, a dance of shared dreams and fears. Euryale spoke of her longing for acceptance, for a normal life, her voice filled with a melancholy that tugged at Marcus's heart. He shared his passion for archaeology, his dreams of uncovering the truth behind myths, and his growing feelings for her. As they talked, the emotional intensity between them grew, fueled by the beauty of their surroundings and the intimacy of the moment. Marcus looked deeply into Euryale's eyes, his hand gently cupping her cheek. She leaned into his touch, feeling a mixture of desire and vulnerability, a connection that transcended their unique circumstances. With a primal growl, Marcus pulled Euryale into a fierce, passionate kiss. Their lips crashed together, the gentleness of before giving way to raw, unbridled desire. The kiss deepened, their tongues battling for dominance, exploring, tasting. Euryale's serpents coiled around Marcus, their cool scales sliding against his heated skin, sending shivers of pleasure down his spine. Marcus's hands roamed Euryale's body with hungry intensity, his touch leaving trails of fire in its wake. He cupped her breasts, his thumbs brushing over her hardened nipples, eliciting a gasp of pleasure from her lips. His fingers traced the curve of her waist, the swell of her hips, before dipping lower, teasing the sensitive skin of her inner thighs. Euryale arched into his touch, her body writhing with need. Her serpents wrapped around Marcus's arms, their undulating movements mirroring the waves of pleasure coursing through her. "Marcus," she moaned, her voice husky with desire. "I need you. Now. Here, under the stars." His eyes, dark with lust, met hers. Without a word, he tore at their clothes, his movements frantic and urgent. The cool night air caressed their bare skin, raising goosebumps and heightening their sensitivity. Marcus laid Euryale down on their discarded cloaks, his body covering hers, his hardness pressing insistently against her thigh. His lips blazed a trail of heat down her body, nipping and sucking at her sensitive spots. He lavished attention on her breasts, his tongue swirling around one nipple while his fingers teased the other. Euryale's back arched off the ground, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. Marcus continued his exploration southward, his tongue dipping into her navel before moving lower. Euryale's breath hitched as he reached her core, his tongue flicking out to taste her. She cried out, her body trembling as he worked her with his mouth, bringing her to the edge of ecstasy before pulling back. Unable to wait any longer, Euryale pulled Marcus up, capturing his lips in a searing kiss. She could taste herself on his tongue, the flavor intoxicating. With a swift movement, she flipped them over, straddling his hips. Marcus groaned as she lowered herself onto him, engulfing him in her tight heat. Their lovemaking was passionate and primal, a celebration of their connection, their shared journey. Euryale rode Marcus with abandon, her head thrown back in ecstasy, her serpents writhing in time with her movements. Marcus's hands gripped her hips, guiding her, his hips thrusting up to meet her. The ruins around them stood as silent witnesses to their union, the stars above twinkling in approval. Euryale's serpents coiled around them both, adding an extra layer of sensation to their intimate dance. The cool scales sliding against their heated skin created a delicious contrast that heightened their pleasure. As they moved together, their bodies joining in perfect harmony, Marcus whispered words of love and adoration. "You're incredible," he groaned, his voice rough with passion. "So beautiful, so perfect." Euryale responded in kind, her voice filled with a joy she had never known before. The pressure built within them, a coiling tension seeking release. With a final, powerful thrust, they reached their peak together. Their cries of pleasure echoed in the night, a primal sound that seemed to resonate with the ancient stones around them. Waves of ecstasy washed over them, leaving them trembling and breathless. Afterwards, they lay entwined, their bodies cooling in the night air, their hearts beating as one. Marcus pulled Euryale close, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "You are incredible," he murmured, his voice filled with awe. "I never imagined I could feel this way about anyone." Euryale smiled, her eyes shining with happiness. "Nor I," she replied. "You've given me a gift I never thought possible, Marcus. You've given me hope." As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, they reluctantly dressed and made their way back to their hidden cave. The island was waking up, the first birds beginning their morning songs, the air filled with the promise of a new day. They walked hand in hand, their bodies tired but their spirits soaring. The night had been a revelation, a turning point in their relationship. As they entered their cave, Marcus pulled Euryale into one last kiss, tender and full of promise. "Whatever happens," he said, his voice steady and sure, "we face it together. You and me, Euryale. Always." She nodded, her heart full to bursting. As they settled down to rest, Euryale knew that her life had changed irrevocably. With Marcus by her side, she was no longer a creature of myth and legend, but a woman in love, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Chapter 5: Seeking Help. The sun was beginning to set as Marcus and Euryale navigated the narrow, winding paths of Naxos, the scent of the sea thick in the air. The distant call of seagulls echoed around them, a haunting melody that seemed to guide their steps. The path was treacherous, but Marcus's sure-footedness and Euryale's serpents, which seemed to have a mind of their own, kept them steady. The island's rugged beauty surrounded them. Ancient olive groves stretched as far as the eye could see, their gnarled trunks testament to centuries of endurance. Wild thyme and oregano perfumed the air, crushed beneath their feet as they walked. In the distance, the azure blue of the Aegean Sea sparkled, a stark contrast to the urgency of their mission. They rounded a bend, and there, nestled among the rocks, stood a modest hut. It was little more than a shack, its walls weathered by time and the relentless sea air. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and the sound of humming drifted from within. Marcus stepped forward and knocked on the door, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and apprehension. The door creaked open, revealing an elderly man with a face as weathered as the hut itself. His eyes, however, were kind, filled with a warmth that seemed to radiate outwards. He smiled, his teeth a flash of white against his tanned skin. "Marcus," he greeted, his voice a soothing blend of knowledge and experience. "It has been a long time." "Nikos," Marcus replied, his voice filled with respect. "Thank you for agreeing to see us." Nikos stepped aside, gesturing for them to enter. The hut was small but cozy, filled with the scent of wood smoke and the faint aroma of fish. A small, wooden table sat in the center, surrounded by mismatched chairs. Marcus and Euryale sat down, their eyes locked onto Nikos as he took his seat. "This is Euryale," Marcus introduced, his hand reaching out to squeeze hers. She remained partially veiled, her snakes hidden, but a few curious ones peeked out, their scales glinting in the dim light. Nikos nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "Ah, a Gorgon," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I have heard tales, of course, but never did I think to meet one in the flesh." Euryale shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting to Marcus. He smiled reassuringly, his thumb brushing gently against her skin. Nikos is a wise man, Euryale, he murmured. He can help us. Nikos leaned back in his chair, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames of the fireplace. The lore surrounding Gorgons is complex, he began, his voice taking on a storyteller's cadence. They are said to be monsters, creatures of nightmares, but the truth is far more nuanced. He spoke of ancient myths and legends, his words painting a vivid picture of a time long past. Euryale listened, her eyes wide with surprise and wonder. Nikos's insights were both comforting and enlightening, offering a glimpse into a world she had never known. But, Nikos warned, his voice growing serious. If your existence is discovered, there will be danger. People fear what they do not understand, and a Gorgon, well, that is something they definitely do not understand. Euryale nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. What can we do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nikos leaned forward, his eyes filled with determination. You must remain hidden, at least for now. But there are those within the local community who might help. People who understand the value of the past, who respect the ancient ways. He offered practical advice, his words filled with wisdom and experience. Marcus listened attentively, his mind racing with possibilities. He could see a glimmer of hope in Euryale's eyes, a spark that had been missing before. As the night wore on, the initial wariness between them began to dissipate. Their conversation flowed easily, spanning topics ancient and modern. Marcus talked about his work, his passion for history, his dreams of uncovering the truth behind myths. Euryale listened, her eyes shining with interest. She, in turn, shared stories of her past, of the ancient world she knew. Marcus found himself growing more empathetic, his admiration for Euryale's strength and resilience increasing. Euryale, meanwhile, became more open to his ideas for her integration into the modern world. She laughed at his jokes, asked questions about his life, and shared her own thoughts and fears. The dynamic between them shifted, hinting at a potential for something deeper than just mentorship. The late hour found them wrapped in a comfortable silence, the soft glow of lantern light casting flickering shadows around the room. Marcus reached out tentatively, his fingers gently grazing one of Euryale's serpentine tresses. The serpent coiled around his finger, its scales cool and smooth to the touch. Euryale shivered, her eyes widening in surprise. It was the first intimate contact she had experienced in centuries, her isolation a chasm of untouched emptiness. She looked at Marcus, her gaze held captive by his. The air between them crackled with charged energy, their breaths sinking in the silent moment. Unable to resist the magnetic pull, Marcus leaned in, his heart pounding wildly in his chest. His eyes flicked to Euryale's lips, full and enticing, a siren's call he could no longer ignore. He brushed his lips against hers, a feather-light touch that sent a jolt of electricity coursing through his veins. The sensation was explosive, a fiery passion that ignited within them both, consuming them in its intense heat. Euryale gasped against his mouth, her breath hitching in surprise. Her serpents writhed, coiling around Marcus's arms, their cool scales contrasting with the warmth of Euryale's skin. She leaned into the kiss, her body pressing against his with an urgency that matched his own. Their kiss deepened, tongues clashing in a dance as old as time, each stroke fanning the flames of their desire. Marcus's hands roamed her body, exploring every curve and valley. He felt the smooth skin of her arms, the taut muscles of her back, the soft swell of her hips. Euryale mirrored his movements, her fingers tracing the planes of his chest, the ridges of his abdomen, the line of his jaw. Each touch was a revelation, a discovery that fueled their need for more. The air around them thickened, charged with the crackling energy of their passion. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, mingling together as their lips parted only to meet again, hunger driving them on. Marcus tangled his fingers in Euryale's serpents, the sensation strange yet exhilarating, as the creatures caressed his skin with their sinuous movements. Euryale's hands found the hem of Marcus's shirt, slipping underneath to feel the heat of his skin. He shivered at her touch, his body aching with a desire he had never known before. He pulled her closer, his hands splayed across her back, their bodies molding together as if they were made to fit. With a low growl, Marcus lifted Euryale onto the table, scattering papers and artifacts to the floor. She gasped at his boldness, her eyes darkening with desire. He stepped between her legs, his hands sliding up her thighs, pushing her dress higher. Euryale's serpents coiled around his arms, their cool scales a delicious contrast to the heat of their skin. Marcus's lips trailed fiery kisses down Euryale's neck, nipping and sucking at her sensitive spots. She moaned, her head falling back, exposing more of her throat to his hungry mouth. His hands cupped her breasts through her dress, thumbs brushing over her hardened nipples, eliciting a sharp gasp of pleasure. Euryale's fingers fumbled with the buttons of Marcus's shirt, her need to feel his skin against hers overwhelming. She pushed the fabric off his shoulders, her hands exploring the broad expanse of his chest, nails lightly scratching, leaving trails of fire in their wake. Their movements became more frantic, more urgent. Marcus pushed Euryale's dress up around her waist, his fingers finding her wet and ready. She cried out as he touched her, her body arching into his hand. Her serpents writhed with her pleasure, their movements mirroring the waves of ecstasy coursing through her. Unable to wait any longer, Marcus freed himself from his trousers. With one swift movement, he buried himself deep within Euryale, both of them crying out at the intense sensation. They paused for a moment, foreheads pressed together, breath mingling, savoring the feeling of their connection. Then, driven by an primal need, they began to move. Their lovemaking was fierce and passionate, the table creaking beneath them with each powerful thrust. Euryale's legs wrapped around Marcus's waist, pulling him deeper, her heels digging into his lower back. Her serpents coiled around them both, adding an extra layer of sensation to their intimate dance. The room filled with the sounds of their passion, skin against skin, breathless moans, and whispered words of love and desire. Marcus was, "Now," Nikos began, his voice gentle but firm, "we must consider your safety, Euryale. The world has changed much since your time, and not all changes have been for the better." Marcus nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. "We need a safe place for Euryale to stay, somewhere she won't be discovered." Nikos stroked his beard thoughtfully. "There is an old lighthouse on the far side of the island. It's been abandoned for years, but it's sturdy and isolated. It could serve as a temporary refuge." Euryale's eyes lit up at the suggestion. "A lighthouse?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity. "I've never seen one before." Marcus squeezed her hand, a smile playing on his lips. "It's a tall tower with a bright light at the top, used to guide ships safely to shore. It's perfect, isolated enough for safety, but with a view of the sea and the stars." They spent the next hour planning, Nikos providing invaluable information about the island's hidden paths and the best ways to avoid detection. As the night wore on, exhaustion began to set in, the weight of the day's events taking its toll. Nikos offered them a small room for the night, a gesture they gratefully accepted. As they settled onto the narrow bed, Marcus pulled Euryale close, his arms wrapping protectively around her. "Are you okay?" he whispered into the darkness, his breath warm against her ear. Euryale nodded, her serpents nuzzling against his chest. "I'm overwhelmed," she admitted. "But not in a bad way. Everything is changing so fast, Marcus. It's exhilarating and terrifying all at once." He pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "I know. But we're in this together, Euryale. Whatever happens, we face it side by side." She smiled, snuggling closer to him. "Together," she echoed, the word a promise on her lips. As they drifted off to sleep, their bodies intertwined, Marcus's last conscious thought was of the journey ahead. It would be dangerous, filled with unknowns, but with Euryale by his side, he felt ready to face anything. The soft light of dawn was just beginning to creep through the window when Marcus awoke. For a moment, he was disoriented, the unfamiliar surroundings confusing him. Then he felt Euryale stir beside him, and everything came rushing back. He watched her sleep, marveling at the peaceful expression on her face. Her serpents were coiled loosely around her head, some of them draped over his arm, their scales cool against his skin. In that moment, he knew with absolute certainty that he would do anything to protect her, to keep her safe in this strange new world she found herself in. As if sensing his gaze, Euryale's eyes fluttered open. She smiled up at him, her eyes still heavy with sleep. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice husky. Marcus leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her lips. "Good morning," he replied, his voice filled with warmth. "Are you ready for today?" Euryale nodded, her expression determined. "As ready as I'll ever be." "What's our first move?" "We need to get to the lighthouse," Marcus said, sitting up and running a hand through his tousled hair. "Nikos said he'd provide us with supplies and directions. Once we're there, we can plan our next steps." They dressed quickly, the anticipation of the day ahead filling them with nervous energy. When they emerged from the room, they found Nikos already awake, preparing a simple breakfast of bread, cheese, and olives. As they ate, Nikos gave them detailed instructions on how to reach the lighthouse, along with warnings about areas to avoid. He also provided them with a bag of supplies, food, water, and a few basic necessities. "Remember," Nikos said as they prepared to leave, his voice grave, "trust is a rare commodity. Be careful who you reveal yourselves to. The world may not be ready for the truth you carry." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "We'll be careful, Nikos. Thank you for everything." As they stepped out into the early morning light, the island spread out before them, a world of possibility and danger. Marcus took Euryale's hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Ready?" he asked, his eyes meeting hers. Euryale nodded, her serpents coiling protectively around her shoulders. "Ready," she replied, her voice filled with determination. Together, they set off towards the lighthouse, their hearts full of hope and trepidation. The journey ahead would be challenging, but as long as they had each other, they felt ready to face whatever trials lay in store. Chapter 6: Exposure. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, eerie shadows across the dig site. Elena Stavros moved stealthily through the underbrush, her eyes scanning the ground for any signs of Marcus's secretive activities. Her heart pounded with a mix of excitement and apprehension. She was onto something big, she could feel it. And she was not about to let Marcus steal the glory this time. Elena's mind raced, recalling the years of fierce competition between them. From their days as graduate students to their current roles as rival archaeologists, their relationship had always been fraught with tension. She remembered the sting of losing out on prestigious grants to Marcus, the frustration of watching him charm his way through academic circles while she worked tirelessly to prove herself. But it wasn't just professional rivalry that drove Elena. Deep down, there was a wounded pride, a sense of inadequacy that she had never been able to shake. Growing up in a family of renowned scholars, Elena had always felt the pressure to excel, to surpass expectations. Her father's words echoed in her mind, "Second place is just the first loser, Elena. You must be the best." She had been meticulously gathering evidence, her sharp mind piecing together the puzzle of Marcus's strange behavior. Clues led her to the hidden sea cave, a place she had never noticed before. The entrance was obscured by foliage, but the disturbed vegetation betrayed recent activity. With a thrill of anticipation, Elena pushed aside the branches and stepped inside. The cave was dimly lit, the air cool and damp. The scent of salt and seaweed filled her nostrils, reminding her of childhood summers spent exploring the Greek coastline. Elena's eyes adjusted to the gloom, and she gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. There, huddled in the shadows, was a figure unlike any she had ever seen. A woman, her body partially covered by a cloak, her head adorned with a writhing mass of serpents. Elena's heart raced as she realized what she was looking at. A Gorgon. A myth come to life. Shocked but thrilled by her discovery, Elena fumbled for her camera. This was it. The find of the century. Fame and academic recognition were within her grasp. She could already see the headlines, the accolades, the jealousy in Marcus's eyes. More importantly, she could hear her father's voice, finally filled with pride. You've done it, Elena. You've proven yourself. But as she raised the camera, a sudden noise startled her. Marcus burst into the cave, his face flushed, his breath ragged. He took in the scene in an instant, his eyes widening in horror. Elena, no, he shouted, lunging towards her. Elena stumbled back, her camera falling to the ground. Marcus grabbed Euryale's hand, his grip tight, his eyes filled with urgency. We have to go. Now. Euryale nodded, her eyes wide with fear. Together, they fled the cave, leaving Elena sprawled on the ground, her camera forgotten. The tension reached a peak as they raced through the dense forest, Elena close on their heels. The fear of being caught fueled their urgency, their hearts pounding, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. They moved through thick underbrush and rocky terrains, the physical exertion and adrenaline heightening their senses and awareness of each other. The island's rugged landscape became both obstacle and ally, providing cover but also hindering their escape. The scent of wild thyme and oregano filled the air as they crushed the plants underfoot, the pungent aroma a stark contrast to the fear that gripped them. Marcus's hand was slick with sweat, but he held on to Euryale tightly, his grip unyielding. He could hear Elena behind them, her furious shouts echoing through the forest. They couldn't afford to slow down, couldn't afford to be caught. Branches whipped at their faces, leaves crunched under their feet, but they pressed on, driven by the primal instinct to survive, to escape. The forest was a blur of green and brown, the sounds of their pursuit a terrifying symphony that pushed them forward. Elena's mind raced as she chased them. Part of her knew this was madness, that she should stop and think rationally. But the prospect of losing this discovery, of watching Marcus claim yet another victory, drove her forward with a desperation she had never known before. Exhausted and breathless, Marcus and Euryale finally found a secluded spot deep in the forest where they could rest. The area was surrounded by tall olive trees, their gnarled trunks and silver-green leaves providing a natural shelter. They collapsed onto the ground, their bodies shaking with exertion, their lungs burning for air. As they sat together, catching their breath, the reality of their situation sank in. The adrenaline that had fueled their escape began to ebb, leaving them with a hollow, frightened feeling. Marcus looked at Euryale, her eyes reflecting the fear that gripped them both. Euryale, he murmured, his voice hoarse with emotion. I'm so sorry. I should have been more careful. I should have. She stopped him with a gentle touch on his arm. No, Marcus. This is not your fault. We both knew the risks. We both chose to face them together. He looked into her eyes, seeing the strength and resilience that had drawn him to her from the start. But he also saw the fear, the uncertainty, the longing for a normal life that seemed forever out of reach. What if she finds us again? Euryale whispered, her voice barely audible. What if she exposes me? What if I lose the chance to live freely, to be with you? Marcus's heart ached at the pain in her voice. He took her hand, his grip firm, his eyes locked onto hers. That won't happen, Euryale. I won't let it. I promise you, I will do everything in my power to protect you. To keep you safe. To give you the life you deserve. Euryale smiled, her eyes filled with gratitude and love. I know you will, Marcus. And I trust you. With my life. With my heart. The emotional intensity between them grew, fueled by their fear and longing. Marcus looked deeply into Euryale's eyes, his hand gently cupping her cheek. She leaned into his touch, feeling a mixture of fear and desire, a connection that transcended the chaos around them. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, their hearts pounding wildly in their chests. With a primal growl, Marcus pulled Euryale into a fierce, desperate kiss. Their lips met with a hunger that was fueled by the danger they faced, a desperate need to connect, to affirm their love in the face of uncertainty. Their breaths mingled, their hearts pounding in sync as they clung to each other, their kisses deepening, hands exploring each other's bodies with a frantic urgency. Marcus's hands roamed Euryale's body, his touch igniting a wildfire within her that threatened to consume them both. He tore at her clothes, his fingers trembling with desperate need. She responded in kind, her hands grasping at his shirt, her fingers fumbling with the buttons. The sound of fabric ripping filled the air as they discarded their clothes, their bodies bared to each other, their souls laid open. The danger they had faced heightened their sensations, making every touch, kiss, and caress more electrifying. Marcus's hands explored Euryale's body with a hungry intensity, tracing the curves of her waist, the swell of her hips, the softness of her breasts. She shuddered beneath his touch, her body arching into his, her serpents writhing with a need that echoed her own. Euryale's serpents coiled around Marcus, their cool scales a sharp contrast to the heat of his body. He could feel their movements, their writhing bodies echoing the dance of their desire. The sensation was exhilarating, a symphony of touch and taste that sent jolts of pleasure coursing through his body. He lifted her, pressing her against a tree, the rough bark biting into her back, the coolness of her serpents contrasting sharply with the heat of his body. She gasped, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and pleasure, her body writhing against his, her serpents tightening their grip, pulling him closer. Their lovemaking was fierce, intense, a wildfire that burned hot and bright, consuming everything in its path. Marcus's body moved against Euryale's with a desperate urgency, his hips pressing into hers, their connection deepening with every thrust. The sound of their bodies coming together filled the forest, a primal, raw symphony that echoed off the trees. Euryale's serpents moved with them, their cool scales sliding against his skin, their writhing bodies echoing the dance of their desire. Marcus could feel them, could sense their excitement, their need, their hunger. It was a sensation unlike any other, a symphony of touch and taste that left him breathless and overwhelmed. Their bodies were slick with sweat, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, their hearts pounding wildly in their chests. The danger they faced fueled their passion, making as darkness fell, Elena made her way back to the dig site, her steps heavy with the weight of her decision. She knew that come morning, she would have to make a choice that would change not only her life but the lives of Marcus and the Gorgon as well. The night ahead would be long, filled with soul-searching and the re-examination of everything she had ever believed about her career, her ambitions, and herself. Chapter 7: Academic Secrets. The twilight cast long shadows across the university campus as Marcus made his way to Professor Whitmore's office. The weight of recent events pressed heavily on his shoulders, each step feeling like a battle against an unseen force. The distant hum of students and rustling leaves seemed to whisper secrets, echoing the tumultuous thoughts racing through Marcus's mind. As he pushed open the heavy oak door to Whitmore's office, the scent of aged parchment and pipe tobacco enveloped him. The room, a sanctuary of academic wisdom, stood in stark contrast to the chaos that threatened to engulf his world. Ancient artifacts and towering stacks of books created a labyrinth of knowledge, the dim desk lamp casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance with untold stories. Professor Whitmore looked up, his eyes twinkling behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Marcus," he said, his voice a soothing blend of warmth and authority. "What brings you here at this hour?" Marcus hesitated, his fingers tracing the intricate carvings on the armrest of the worn leather chair. "Professor, I need your advice. It's complicated." As Marcus unfolded his hypothetical scenario, Whitmore's expression grew increasingly serious. The air in the office seemed to thicken with each word, the gravity of the situation palpable. "Balancing personal responsibilities with professional obligations is a delicate dance, Marcus," Whitmore said, his voice low and measured. "The academic world can be ruthless, and the price of secrecy can be high. As Marcus left Whitmore's office, the weight of his responsibilities felt heavier than ever. But he also felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to protect Euryale at all costs, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. Meanwhile, across the sea, rumors had begun to spread like wildfire. Whispers of a Gorgon on the island reached the ears of Alexandros Demetriou, a wealthy collector known for his ruthless ambition and insatiable desire for unique and valuable finds. His interest was piqued, and he wasted no time in gathering a team of researchers to investigate. The island was abuzz with activity as Alexandros and his team arrived. They questioned the locals, bribed informants, and used every resource at their disposal to uncover any leads. Alexandros was a formidable figure, his eyes cold and calculating, his movements precise and deliberate. He left no stone unturned in his relentless pursuit, a new layer of threat that added to the already tense situation Marcus and Euryale found themselves in. Elena, torn between ambition and conscience, found herself at a crossroads. The discovery of the Gorgon could make her career, but at what cost? As dawn broke after a sleepless night, she made her decision. She would meet with Alexandros, but she would be cautious, revealing only enough to gauge his intentions. Back in their hidden sanctuary, Marcus and Euryale huddled together, their faces etched with concern. They had heard of Alexandros' arrival, and the danger it posed was all too real. They knew they had to be even more cautious, to stay one step ahead of the ruthless collector. "We need to be strategic," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within him. "Alexandros won't stop until he uncovers the truth. We have to outsmart him, to stay hidden and protect ourselves." Euryale nodded, her eyes reflecting the fear that gripped them both. But there was also a steely determination, a resolve that matched Marcus's own. "Together, we can face anything. We've come this far, we won't let him take us down now." The increased danger brought them closer together, their bond deepening as they faced the external threat. They supported each other emotionally, their conversations filled with whispered words of encouragement and reassurance. They strategized ways to outsmart Alexandros, their minds working in sync, their hearts beating as one. In a small cafe overlooking the harbor, Elena met with Alexandros. The air was thick with tension as they discussed their findings, their voices low and urgent. Elena carefully measured her words, revealing tantalizing hints while holding back crucial information. Alexandros listened intently, his eyes gleaming with a predatory light that sent shivers down Elena's spine. Unbeknownst to them, a figure lurked in the shadows, listening intently to every word. Professor Whitmore, having followed Elena out of concern, found himself privy to a conversation that confirmed his worst fears. He knew he had to warn Marcus, but how to do so without raising suspicion. As Marcus and Euryale moved through the dense forest, their steps careful and deliberate, their senses heightened by the constant threat of discovery. The rustling of leaves, the snap of twigs, the distant call of birds, every sound was a potential warning, every movement a possible threat. But they pressed on, driven by the desire to protect each other and the love that bound them together. A sudden noise startled them, the snap of a twig echoing through the forest. They froze, their hearts pounding in their chests, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. Marcus's hand tightened around Euryale's, his eyes scanning the surrounding foliage for any sign of danger. But it was just a deer, its eyes wide with surprise as it bounded away through the underbrush. They breathed a sigh of relief, their bodies sagging with the release of tension. But they knew they couldn't afford to relax, couldn't afford to let their guard down for even a moment. As they continued their journey, the danger they faced seemed to heighten their senses, to deepen their connection. They were more aware of each other than ever before, their bonds strengthened by the trials they faced together. They knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it as one, their love a fortress that would protect them from the storms to come. The sun was setting when they heard it, voices in the distance, growing closer. They recognized one immediately, Alexandros. Panic gripped them as they realized how close they were to discovery. Marcus pulled Euryale behind a large boulder, his body shielding hers, as they held their breath, waiting for the danger to pass. the voices grew louder, more distinct. Alexandros was not alone, they could hear Elena's voice as well. The realization that Elena had joined forces with Alexandros sent a wave of betrayal through Marcus. They exchanged a look of desperation, knowing that discovery was now a very real possibility. As the footsteps drew nearer, the tension reached a fever pitch. Marcus's mind raced, searching for a way out, a plan to protect Euryale. In that moment, as danger closed in from all sides, he knew that their next move would determine everything. Chapter 8: Living Openly. In the dimly lit cave, Marcus and Euryale hunched over a makeshift table, their minds racing with strategies and plans. The air was thick with tension and the scent of the sea, the sound of waves crashing against the shore, a steady rhythm that echoed their determined heartbeats. They knew that for Euryale to blend into society, they needed a foolproof plan, one that would allow her to experience the world without drawing unwanted attention. "We need a cover story," Marcus said, his fingers tracing the grain of the wooden table. "Something that explains your appearance without raising suspicion." Euryale nodded, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames of their small fire. "A rare medical condition, perhaps? Something that affects my appearance and necessitates covering my eyes?" Marcus's face lit up with excitement. "Exactly. We can say you have a severe sensitivity to light, that exposure could be harmful. It's plausible and should deter any unwanted questions." With their plan in place, they began gathering the necessary items. Marcus procured a beautifully embroidered veil, its delicate designs shimmering in the light. He also gathered stylish yet practical clothing that concealed Euryale's unique features, adding accessories that added an air of mystery without drawing too much attention. The day of the local festival arrived, and the island was alive with vibrant energy. The air was filled with the tantalizing scents of various cuisines, the distant hum of lively music, and the excited chatter of people. Euryale, dressed in her carefully crafted attire, clung to Marcus's hand as they made their way through the bustling crowd. Her heart pounded with a mix of excitement and anxiety, but Marcus's reassuring presence was a steady anchor. The festival atmosphere was electric, a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds. Stalls lined the streets, filled with colorful crafts, delicious food, and lively performances. Children laughed as they chased each other through the crowd, their faces painted with smiles and the remnants of sweet treats. The air was thick with the mingling scents of spices, sweet pastries, and the salty tang of the sea. An elderly woman, her face etched with the lines of a life well lived, approached them with a warm smile. "Calimera," she greeted, her eyes twinkling. "Welcome to our festival. You must try my lucumades, they're made from a recipe passed down through generations." Marcus translated for Euryale, and they accepted the offer gratefully. The sweet, honey-drenched dough balls were a revelation, and Euryale's eyes lit up behind her veil at the new taste sensation. Euryale's initial anxiety began to fade as she immersed herself in the festivities. She marveled at the vibrant tapestry of life around her, her eyes sparkling behind the veil. Marcus guided her through the crowd, introducing her to various aspects of modern culture. They visited different stalls, tried local delicacies, and watched street performances that left them both laughing and clapping along with the crowd. In one particularly memorable moment, they found themselves drawn to a street musician playing a lively tune on his guitar. The melody was infectious, and before they knew it, Marcus and Euryale were dancing, their bodies moving in sync with the music. They shared knowing smiles, their connection deepening with each step, each laugh, each shared moment. As they moved through the festival, they encountered more locals eager to share their culture. A group of men invited them to join in a traditional dance, the bouzouki music filling the air with its distinctive sound. Marcus hesitated, but Euryale, emboldened by the festive atmosphere, nodded eagerly. They joined hands with the locals, forming a circle. The dance steps were simple, but the energy was infectious. Euryale, guided by Marcus and the friendly locals, found herself swept up in the rhythm. For a moment, she forgot her fears, lost in the joy of movement and community. A young girl approached Euryale, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Your veil is beautiful," she said in halting English. "Are you a princess?" Euryale knelt down, touched by the child's innocence. "No, not a princess," she replied softly, Marcus translating. "Just someone who sees the world a little differently." The girl nodded solemnly, then impulsively hugged Euryale before running back to her parents. The moment left Euryale with a bittersweet ache, a longing for a normalcy she could never fully have. As the day wore on, Marcus and Euryale found themselves drawn to a small gathering near the edge of the square. An elderly man, his face weathered by sun and sea, was recounting ancient myths to a rapt audience. They listened, spellbound, as he spoke of gods and monsters, heroes and villains. When he began the tale of Medusa, Euryale tensed. Marcus squeezed her hand reassuringly, but they both listened intently. The storyteller's version was different from what they knew, more nuanced, portraying Medusa as a victim of circumstance rather than a monster. "You see," the old man concluded, his eyes scanning the crowd, "our myths are not just stories. They are reflections of our humanity, our fears, our hopes. They teach us to look beyond appearances, to find the truth beneath." His gaze seemed to linger on Euryale for a moment, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. Did he know? Could he sense the truth behind her veil? But the moment passed, and the crowd began to disperse. As they walked away, Euryale leaned close to Marcus. "Do you think," she whispered, "that people could ever truly understand? Accept me for who I am?" Marcus's heart ached at the vulnerability in her voice. "Some would," he said softly. "The ones who matter. And that's enough." But despite the success of their plan, a subtle tension remained. Euryale's fear of being discovered lingered, a constant shadow that threatened to dim her enjoyment. Marcus remained vigilant, his eyes constantly scanning the crowd for any sign of danger, any hint of recognition. As they made their way through the festival, the atmosphere shifted slightly. The music seemed to fade into the background, and the laughter of the crowd took on an almost menacing tone. Marcus's hand tightened around Euryale's, his senses on high alert. And then, he saw her. Dr. Elena Stavros, her eyes narrowed with suspicion, her gaze locked onto them. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest as he quickly realized they were being followed. He whispered urgently to Euryale, and they began to weave through the crowd, trying to lose Elena in the sea of faces. But Elena was relentless, her determination fueled by her curiosity and desire to uncover the truth. The chase intensified as Elena picked up her pace, her eyes never leaving Marcus and Euryale. They darted through narrow alleys, their footsteps echoing off the cobblestones, the festive atmosphere a stark contrast to their desperate escape. The scent of grilled meats and sweet pastries hung heavy in the air, mingling with the distant hum of laughter and music, creating a surreal backdrop to their high-stakes game of cat and mouse. Several times, Elena almost caught up to them, her hand reaching out, her breath hot on their necks. But Marcus's quick thinking and knowledge of the area allowed them to stay one step ahead. They dodged through bustling market areas, their bodies brushing against colorful fabrics and fragrant spices, the crowd a living, breathing obstacle course. In a final, desperate sprint, Marcus and Euryale found a hidden pathway that led them away from the main festival area. They dashed through the path, their hearts pounding, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. The path was narrow and overgrown, the scent of damp earth and verdant foliage filling their nostrils, the rustling of leaves a symphony of nature that seemed to urge them on. They finally found refuge in an abandoned building, their chests heaving, their bodies slick with sweat. The building was dilapidated, its walls crumbling and its windows shattered, but it offered a temporary sanctuary, a respite from the relentless pursuit. Marcus and Euryale leaned against the cool stone wall, their eyes locked onto each other, their breaths gradually slowing. The experience underscored the fragility of their situation, the ever-present danger of discovery. But it also reinforced their determination, their resolve to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. "We can't let her find us," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within him. We have to be more careful, more strategic. Euryale nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. Together, we can face anything. We've come this far, we won't let her take us down now. In that moment, amidst the rubble and the remnants of their desperate escape, they found a sense of solace, a sense of belonging, a sense of love that transcended the challenges they faced. They understood that their journey would be fraught with danger, that every step forward would bring new obstacles, new threats. But they also knew that their love was a beacon of light, a guiding force that would see them through the darkest of times. Their lovemaking was fierce, intense, a wildfire that burned hot and bright, consuming everything in its path. Marcus's body moved against Euryale's with a desperate urgency, his hips pressing into hers, their connection deepening with every thrust. The sound of their bodies coming together filled the abandoned building, a primal, raw symphony that echoed off the crumbling walls. Euryale's serpents moved with them, their cool scales sliding against his skin, their writhing bodies echoing the dance of their desire. Marcus could feel them, could sense their excitement, their need, their hunger. It was a sensation unlike any other, a symphony of touch and taste that left him breathless and overwhelmed. Their bodies were slick with sweat, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, their hearts pounding wildly in their chests. The danger they faced fueled their passion, making every touch, every kiss, every caress more intense, more desperate. They lost themselves in each other, their bodies moving in sync, their hearts beating as one, their souls intertwined. As they reached the peak of their pleasure, they cried out, their voices echoing through the abandoned building, a primal call that resonated with the raw, untamed nature of their love. Their bodies shuddered, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, their hearts pounding in their chests. Waves of pleasure coursed through them, leaving them breathless and fulfilled. In the aftermath, they clung to each other, their bodies still entwined, their hearts still racing. The abandoned building was filled with the soft sounds of their ragged breaths, the rustling of leaves, and the distant hum of the festival. Marcus looked at Euryale, her eyes reflecting the dappled sunlight filtering through the broken windows, her face flushed with pleasure. He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her lips, his hand gently stroking her cheek. "I love you, Euryale," he murmured, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and tenderness. "I love you more than anything in this world." She smiled, her eyes filled with a soft glow. "And I love you, Marcus. With every fiber of my being. With every beat of my heart." They shared whispered words of love and reassurance, their bond stronger than ever. The physical connection had solidified their emotional commitment to each other, a promise that transcended the challenges they faced. As they lay there, their bodies entwined, their hearts beating as one, they knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Their love was a fortress, a sanctuary, a beacon of light that would guide them through the darkest of times. And in that moment, amidst the rubble and the remnants of their desperate escape, they found a sense of peace, a sense of belonging, a sense of love that would sustain them, no matter what storms lay ahead. Marcus's thoughts drifted to the day's events. The joy Euryale had experienced, the connections she had made, however briefly, with the locals. He realized that their love, while powerful, couldn't be the only thing in her life. "Euryale," he said softly, his fingers tracing patterns on her skin. "What you experienced today, the dance, the stories, the kindness of strangers, that's what I want for you. A life full of experiences, connections, joy." Euryale's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "But how?" she whispered. "How can I have that when I must always hide?" Marcus kissed her forehead gently. "We'll find a way," he promised. "Together, we'll create a life where you can be yourself, where you can experience the world without fear. It won't be easy, but nothing worth having ever is." Euryale nodded, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. She realized that their relationship was more than just passion and protection. It was a partnership, a shared dream of a better future. With renewed determination, they straightened their clothing, wiped the sweat from their brows, and prepared to face the world again. They knew that their safety, their freedom, their love depended on their ability to stay one step ahead, to outsmart their pursuers, to protect each other at all costs. And they were ready to face whatever lay ahead, ready to fight for their love, ready to live openly, no matter the challenges that awaited them. Hand in hand, they stepped out of the abandoned building, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The festival sound still drifted on the evening breeze, a reminder of the world they longed to be part of. With each step, they moved closer to their dream of living openly, no matter the challenges that awaited them. Chapter 9: Decision Time. In the heart of the island, far removed from the festival's vibrant chaos, Marcus and Euryale confronted a critical decision. The gentle breeze whispered through the leaves overhead, dappling the sunlight on the ground, but the serene scene belied the storm brewing within them. Their narrow escape from Dr. Elena Stavros had left them shaken, the stark reality of their situation undeniable. Marcus paced, his footsteps crunching on dried leaves, while Euryale sat on a fallen log, her serpents restlessly coiling around her. "We need to consider our options," Marcus said, tension tightening his voice. "Leaving the island could buy us time, but it means abandoning everything we know." Euryale looked up, fear and longing mingling in her eyes. "I don't want to lose this, Marcus. I've just begun to live, to feel normal. But I'm terrified of what happens if we stay." Marcus knelt before her, taking her hands. "I know, Euryale. I want to give you the world, but I also want to keep you safe. Staying means facing Elena, Alexandros, and whatever else comes our way. But running, it feels like admitting defeat." Her fingers tightened around his, her voice a soft whisper. "I trust you, Marcus. Whatever we decide, we'll face it together." As they weighed their choices, the sound of approaching footsteps sent a jolt of alarm through them. Turning, they saw Dr. Elena Stavros and Alexandros Demetriou entering the clearing, their expressions a mix of determination and an unexpected hint of empathy. Elena's resolve-filled eyes sent a shiver down Marcus's spine. Alexandros exuded a calm yet menacing presence, his gaze cold and calculating. Cornered, they had nowhere to run. Marcus stepped protectively in front of Euryale. "What do you want?" he demanded, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. Elena advanced, her gaze fixed on Euryale. "The truth, Marcus. We deserve to know the truth about her." Alexandros remained silent, his expression inscrutable, his eyes never leaving Euryale. Marcus felt the tension thicken, the calm before a storm. "The truth is," Marcus declared, conviction resonating in his voice, "Euryale is a Gorgon, a living embodiment of ancient myth. She's not a monster or a specimen to be studied. She's the woman I love, and I'll protect her with my life." Euryale stood beside him, her serpents writhing with fear and defiance. She reached out, her hand finding Marcus's, their fingers intertwining. "I won't let anyone take this away from me," she asserted, her voice strong and resolute. "Not without a fight." In the tense standoff, Marcus and Euryale's eyes locked, their hearts beating in unison. The intensity of their situation drew them closer, igniting a fierce and passionate connection that transcended the chaos around them. Adrenaline and deep affection surged through their veins, creating an overwhelming mix of emotions. Marcus, unable to resist their magnetic pull, drew Euryale urgently into his arms. Their need for each other was palpable, a tangible force that ignited the air around them. Their lips met in a fierce, desperate kiss, fueled by shared danger and raw passion. Marcus's tongue delved into Euryale's mouth, tasting and exploring her with a hunger that left them both breathless. Their hands roamed each other's bodies with desperate urgency, igniting a wildfire that threatened to consume them both. Clothes were hastily discarded, revealing heated skin beneath. Their bodies pressed together, every touch and caress fueled by intense emotions, every sensation heightened by the fear and thrill of the unknown. Marcus's hands, rough and demanding, traced the curves of Euryale's body, drawing a gasp from deep within her. He cupped her breasts, his thumbs brushing over her hardened nipples, eliciting a moan that reverberated through their connected lips. Euryale arched into him, her body aching for his touch, her serpents writhing with need. They coiled around Marcus, their cool scales contrasting with the heat radiating from his body. He lifted her effortlessly, pressing her back against the rough bark of a nearby tree. The sensation was a raw, primal contrast to the softness of her skin, intensifying the electric current pulsing between them. Euryale wrapped her legs around his waist, aligning their bodies in a perfect, urgent need. Marcus's mouth left hers, trailing a path of fire down her neck, his teeth grazing her skin, sending shivers cascading through her entire body. His hands gripped her thighs, his fingers digging into her flesh with possessive urgency. He ground against her, the hard length of him pressing against her heat, the friction sending jolts of pleasure through them both. Euryale's hands explored his body, her fingers tracing the ridges of his muscles, reveling in the feel of his strength beneath her touch. She gripped his shoulders, her nails digging into his skin as she clung to him, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Their bodies moved together in a desperate, exquisite rhythm, a dance of passion and hunger that consumed them completely. When Marcus finally entered her, it was with a fierce, unyielding thrust that filled her completely. Euryale cried out, her body arching against him, her serpents tightening their grip in a symphony of sensation. He withdrew slowly, only to plunge back into her, each stroke deliberate and intense, each connection deeper than the last. Their lovemaking was explosive, a symphony of touch and taste that left them both breathless and deeply connected. With each thrust, each caress, they affirmed their love, their bodies moving in perfect harmony, their hearts beating as one. The physical connection between them was electrifying, every touch, every kiss, every whispered word a testament to their unbreakable bond. The intensity of their connection built, their bodies moving in a frenzied rhythm, their hearts beating in sync. Pleasure coiled tighter within them, teetering on the brink of something profound and overwhelming. With a final, explosive thrust, they tumbled over the edge together. Their cries of pleasure echoed through the forest, a raw, primal call resonating with the untamed nature of their love. Waves of pleasure coursed through them, their bodies shuddering, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, their hearts pounding in their chests. In the aftermath, they clung to each other, their foreheads pressed together, their eyes locked in a gaze filled with unspoken love and devotion. "I love you, Euryale," Marcus murmured, awe and tenderness filling his voice. "I love you more than anything in this world." She smiled, her eyes glowing softly. "And I love you, Marcus. With every fiber of my being. With every beat of my heart." After their intense moment, Marcus and Euryale quickly composed themselves, adjusting their clothing and catching their breath. They turned to face Elena and Alexandros, who had seemingly been engaged in a hushed discussion during the couple's private interlude. As Marcus and Euryale approached, they noticed a change in Elena and Alexandros' demeanor. The harsh exterior Elena had worn like armor seemed to have softened, her eyes reflecting a newfound pensiveness. Alexandros, too, appeared less aggressive, his ambitious air replaced by a quiet thoughtfulness. Elena stepped forward, her voice softer than before. "We've been talking, and I must admit, this situation isn't what I expected. The way you protect each other, the bond you clearly share, it's given us pause." She continued, "I never intended harm. My pursuit was driven by scientific curiosity, a desire to understand the unexplainable. But seeing you both stand united against us, it makes me realize some things might be beyond our current understanding." Chapter 10, New Alliances. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the island as Marcus and Euryale stood outside their new home. The quaint, secluded cottage was nestled amidst a grove of ancient olive trees, the scent of wild herbs and salty air filling their nostrils. The cottage was charming, with whitewashed walls and a terracotta roof, surrounded by lush greenery that offered both privacy and tranquility. It was the perfect sanctuary for Euryale to feel safe and at peace. Inside, the cottage was filled with personal touches that blended Marcus's academic interests with Euryale's newfound love for the modern world. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with ancient texts and contemporary novels. Antique artifacts shared space with vibrant art prints, creating a harmonious blend of old and new. The air was filled with the comforting scent of fresh coffee and the distant hum of the sea, a symphony of peace and tranquility. As they settled into their new life, their circle of allies played crucial roles in helping them adapt and thrive. Elena Stavros, once their adversary, had become an unexpected but valuable ally. Her scientific background and resources proved invaluable in creating a safe environment for Euryale. Elena's motivations were complex, a mixture of scientific curiosity, guilt over her initial pursuit, and a growing respect for the couple's bond. She worked tirelessly to develop technologies that could help Euryale blend in more easily, driven by a desire to right her past wrongs and contribute to something truly extraordinary. Alexandros Demetriou, the wealthy businessman with a passion for mythology, used his influence and connections to ensure Marcus and Euryale's safety. His support went beyond mere protection. He saw in their story a chance to bridge the gap between myth and reality, a lifelong dream of his. Alexandros provided them with resources for research and travel, eager to learn more about the ancient world through Euryale's first-hand experiences. His involvement was fueled by a deep-seated desire to prove that the legends he'd spent his life studying had roots in truth. Nikos, the local fisherman who had first befriended Marcus, became a steadfast companion. His simple wisdom and deep connection to the island's traditions offered Euryale a different perspective on adapting to a new world. Nikos's motivations were pure, a genuine fondness for the couple and a belief in the power of community. He introduced them to local customs and helped them integrate into island life, seeing their presence as a way to breathe new life into the old ways. Professor Whitmore, Marcus's mentor, provided intellectual stimulation and academic support. His involvement was driven by a mixture of scholarly interest and paternal affection for Marcus. He saw in Euryale a living link to the ancient world he had studied for decades, and his excitement at the possibilities for new discoveries was palpable. Whitmore's presence helped ground their extraordinary situation in the realm of academic pursuit, giving it a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. These allies, each with their unique motivations and contributions, formed a protective network around Marcus and Euryale. Their support allowed the couple to establish daily routines that brought a sense of normalcy and comfort. They began their mornings with walks along the beach, the soft sand beneath their feet and the rhythmic sound of waves providing a soothing backdrop to their conversations. They shared stories, laughed at trivialities, and reveled in the simple joy of each other's company. Breakfast was a shared endeavor, a time for them to experiment with new recipes and savor the flavors of the island. Lunch was often a simple affair, enjoyed together in the shade of the olive trees, while dinner was a time for deeper discussions about their day, their plans, and their dreams. These routines helped Euryale adjust, providing a structure that made her feel more at home in this new world. As they became more involved in the local community, Marcus and Euryale slowly gained the trust and acceptance of the island's inhabitants. They participated in community events, lending a helping hand whenever needed. Euryale used her unique abilities discreetly, offering assistance with local issues, earning the community's gratitude and respect. Her warmth and kindness won over even the most skeptical of neighbors, forging deeper bonds with the people around them. Their relationship grew stronger with each passing day. Marcus remained fully committed to helping Euryale adapt to her new life, offering unwavering support and encouragement. Euryale, in turn, felt more accepted and loved than she ever had. They shared moments of deep intimacy and connection, their bond solidifying with each touch, each shared laugh, each whispered word of love. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, the flickering flames casting a warm glow over their faces, Marcus looked into Euryale's eyes. "What do you think about traveling?" he asked, his voice filled with a mixture of excitement and longing. "There's so much of the world I want to show you, so many adventures we can share." Euryale smiled, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "I would love that, Marcus. To explore the world with you, to see new places, to experience new things. It sounds like a dream come true." Their conversations turned to future plans, discussing possible travels and further involvement in academic and local projects. They dreamed of visiting ancient sites, of contributing to historical research, of using their combined knowledge and skills to make a difference. Their plans reflected their deepening partnership, their shared vision for a life filled with purpose and meaning. As they built their new life together, Marcus and Euryale took time to reflect on their journey. The challenges they had faced, the obstacles they had overcome, the love and support they had discovered along the way. Their conversations were filled with gratitude and love, a celebration of the progress they had made, both individually and as a couple. One evening, they decided to take a moment to appreciate the beauty of their surroundings. Hand in hand, they walked to a nearby cliff overlooking the ocean. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the water, creating a serene and breathtaking backdrop. The gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead, carrying with it the scent of the sea and the distant hum of nature. Marcus and Euryale stood hand in hand, feeling the warmth of the sun on their faces, listening to the soothing sound of the waves. The tranquility of the moment reflected the peace and stability they had found together. Their hearts were filled with a profound sense of contentment, a deep satisfaction that came from knowing they had faced their challenges and emerged stronger and more united than ever. Marcus turned to Euryale, his eyes filled with love and admiration. "Euryale," he said, his voice soft and tender, "I never imagined I could love someone as much as I love you. You have brought light into my life, a light that has shown me the true meaning of love, of commitment, of strength." Euryale looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. "Marcus, you have given me more than I ever thought possible. You have shown me a world filled with love and acceptance, a world where I can be myself, where I can grow and thrive. I am forever grateful for your unwavering support, for your love, for your faith in me." He reached out, gently cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. "I promise you, Euryale, that no matter what challenges we face, I will stand by your side. Together, we will overcome any obstacle, any trial, any storm. Because our love, our bond, our commitment to each other is stronger than anything that comes our way." Euryale leaned into his touch, her eyes never leaving his. "I promise you the same, Marcus. Together, we will face whatever lies ahead, hand in hand, heart in heart. Our love is our fortress, our sanctuary, our beacon of light. And as long as we have each other, we can conquer anything." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft, warm glow over their faces. The ocean stretched out before them, a vast expanse of possibility and promise. The gentle breeze carried with it the whispers of their future, a future filled with hope, with love, with endless opportunities. As they stood there, hand in hand, looking out over the ocean, Marcus and Euryale knew that their journey had been a testament to the power of love and understanding. They had faced the most unique of challenges, and through it all, their love had grown stronger, their bond deeper, their commitment unwavering. Their future was a tapestry woven with threads of hope, of dreams, of plans, of adventures. It was a future filled with new beginnings, with shared visions, with endless possibilities. And as they stood there, their hearts filled with love and gratitude, they knew that whatever came their way, they were ready to face it together, hand in hand, heart in heart, united by a love that was their fortress, their sanctuary, their eternal beacon of light.